This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, speculation is mounting that former Vice President Joe Biden will soon enter the race for the Democratic presidential nomination. On Tuesday, he addressed the International Association of Firefighters in Washington, D.C.
Appreciate the energy you showed when I got up here. Save it a little longer. I may need it in a few weeks. Be careful what you wish for.
Well, to talk more about Biden, we go now to Washington, D.C. to talk to Washington editor for Harper's magazine, Andrew Cockburn. His latest piece for Harper's is headlined, No Joe, Joe Biden's Disastrous Legislative Legacy. Welcome back to Democracy Now! Andrew, talk to us about his legacy.
Well, it is, as the title of my piece, subtitle of my piece indicates, it's pretty disastrous. I mean, going back to the beginning, his most sort of active cause when he first got into the Senate in the 1970s was to be a fierce opponent of busing, you know, the effort to integrate schools, which was the main effort to integrate schools across the U.S., particularly in the North. And Joe Biden was a vociferous opponent of that, introduced legislation to weaken it. And he said he'd made it comfortable for liberals basically to oppose busing. So that was rather shocking. Then he went on in his next major initiative throughout the 80s and into the 90s was on being tough on crime. He would argue fiercely for tougher sentences, and he teamed up, unbelievably, with Strom Thurmond, who was a sort of arch segregationist who had run on a Dixiecrat ticket in 1948. And with this, aging racist, he fought to increase sentences for everything. Particularly, he tried to introduce 51 new categories of death penalty, and he. The notorious disparity between crack cocaine as used by black consumers and powder cocaine as used by white people, just shocking sentence disparity. He was right behind Bill Clinton for the 1994 Crime Control Act, which, basically incarcerated a whole generation of young black people. And of course, if we discuss his electability, black people well remember that. So it's been pretty shocking all the way down.
Can you talk about Anita Hill?
Well, yes. I mean, that's the one, amid a sort of long litany of disasters, that's the one that people tend to remember, and quite rightly so. I mean, Anita Hill reluctantly came forward to talk about Clarence Thomas's rather warped record on sexual harassment. And Biden didn't want to call her. He basically threw her under the bus. He refused to call witnesses that would have backed up her testimony. It was clear that he was really concerned about his own reputation. He didn't care much for Anita Hill's. And as a result, we were saddled with Clarence Thomas for as long as he feels like serving, this extremely right-wing justice.
And Joe Biden's role in eliminating a bankruptcy by students on student debt?
Well, he made it impossible for students to really get out of crushing student debt through bankruptcy. On bankruptcy, of course, his major role has been as the errand boy for the banks and credit card companies, who have been his major donors throughout his career. And of course, he represents Delaware, which is the sort of Cayman Island, our onshore version of the Cayman Islands, which is really ruled by the banks and, the financial industry. And, interesting, of course, that although he's done them such faithful service over the years, he tends not to talk about that very much. Elizabeth Warren, a long time ago, rather waspishly pointed out that he didn't talk about his relationship with these, or among his many boasts on his website, there's not much to read about his relationship with the credit card companies.
We only have 30 seconds, but how would you evaluate his role as vice president under President Obama?
Well, very, very disappointing. For example, he did absolutely nothing I mean, people were outraged that the perpetrators of the 2008 crash got off scot-free, essentially, well, better than scot-free, with enormous bonuses. His replacement in the Senate, Ted Kaufman, tried to introduce a bill to break up the banks. He got no support from Joe Biden. His record on foreign policy under Biden was equally disastrous. He basically, helped caused the installation or maintained a government in Iraq, which was viciously sectarian and corrupt, which had a lot to do with the rise of ISIS.
We have to end the show, but we are going to do part 2 and post it online at democracynow.org. Andrew Cockburn, Washington editor for Harper's Magazine, will link to his latest piece, No Joe Biden's Disastrous Legislative Legacy. I'll be speaking in Denver, Colorado on March 15th, Friday night, 7 at East High School. Check democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.